What's up, everybody? Matt Gajewski here, back again with the Stochastic channel. Today, we're talking college football DFS ahead of the Week 11 main slate. Before we get started, make sure to hit that thumbs up button, subscribe to the channel, and hit the notification bell so you know when this and all other content goes live. We're also brought to you by Prize Picks. They have a first match deposit bonus up to $100 for new users, and they are sponsoring one free month of Odd Shopper. We have all kinds of tools for sports betting, sides, totals, and we have player props that'll help you directly with Prize Picks and all sorts of markets, NBA, NFL, college football, even niche sports, you name it, they have it. You can take advantage of this by clicking the link in the video description below. Must be 21 or older to play. If you or somebody you know has a gambling problem, please call or text 1-800-GAMBLER. All right, we've got a phenomenal main slate. Bringing you behind the glass, here's our data usage tool totals updated as of Friday morning. If you want access to this, we actually have a very special limited time offer. It's good through tomorrow, where you can get your first week or month half off when you click the link in the video description and use the promo code COLLEGE2023 to give you this tool, player projections, ownership projections, college hoops. It's all there, and it ends tomorrow. So take advantage of that if you'd like, all powered by yours truly. All right, we're going to kick things off and go through our usual routine where we talk the DraftKings main slate. We'll talk FanDuel, and then we'll rank top 5 by position. I'm not going to forget to do FanDuel today. That is my mission. Not going to forget to rank FanDuel. All right. So we kick things off. Michigan, Penn State, phenomenal real-life game. Not the best DFS game. 4.5-point spread in favor of Michigan. The total is 45. Michigan's slow, 132nd in pace. There's only one team slower. It's probably an Armed Forces Academy. I would guess Air Force. We'll find out later. They're on a night slate. Anyway, 42.5% pass rate for Michigan. I think the real question is, do they speed up? Do they pass more? This is their first competitive game all year. They haven't allowed more than 10 points in a game. On the other side, Penn State 71st in pace, 48% pass rate. We have seen them play tough games. Michigan's tough. Now, I think you could maybe look at a contrarian McCarthy. If he's unleashed, we just don't know. He has been in spots, just not this year. Averages 237 as a passer, and he can run. We just haven't seen it because they haven't needed to use it. I mean, I would still rather get like McCarthy in a pace-up spot, and the defense for Penn State's awesome. So he's still on the outside looking in for me. But, you know, normally this is kind of just an X out the Michigan pass game because of volume concerns. It's probably going to be better here, but still efficiency a concern for the first time all year. Michigan's still just not of offense. Like the backfield, we could see extra opportunities for Corum and Donovan Edwards. The problem is you're not getting a discount on either of them. Still a tough matchup. Still not seeing the volume we want. So I think they're just tournament-only plays. A little better on FanDuel where they're cheaper. And then the pass game. I don't hate getting to Roman Wilson, Cornelius Johnson, or Loveland. I think Johnson's probably my favorite play, just price adjusted. I do imagine I'll get a little bit of him as like a one-off in my 150 sets. But otherwise, I don't think we're going to get a ton of Michigan pass game stuff either. This would be just like a sprinkling in, 150 sets if you're running multiple lineups. Penn State looks even worse. Implied under 21 points. Drew Aller's been lackluster, to put it kindly. 100 rushing yards, averages 210 through the air. And we've at least seen them play Ohio State, West Virginia, a couple competent teams. Bo Pribula plays a little bit in the run game, which siphons off enough where also hurts Drew Aller. Not a ton of interest there. The backfield here, Nick Singleton and Katron Allen. Allen is slowly starting to work his way ahead of Singleton, not by a lot, and I don't think this will get beyond like a 60-40 split, but it's at least worth noting he's the preferred play if you get to one, still just tournament only. And then Keandre Lambert-Smith, Dante Cephas, just pure GPP options for your sprinklings in 150s. Would rather look elsewhere to other studs. Just not a great DFS game. Awesome real-life game. Make sure you got it on your quad box or whatever you're watching. Bama, Kentucky, 11-point spread in favor of the Tide, 47 total. Bama's 91st in pace. They have a 40% pass rate. Kentucky, 125th in pace, 52% pass rate. It's kind of Bama or pass. Jalen Milroe unleashed a little bit as a rusher. 13 designed attempts. That was more than he had in 3 prior games combined. I mean, if he's going to run 13 times, he needs to be considered. The problem is there's been no consistency. They've only done this a couple times this year, so I still do not really have a lot of faith. but it at least makes him somewhat interesting for tournaments. Kentucky's defense is pretty good. As a passer, 230 yards per game. He's been pretty solid. They just don't throw a lot. Only 22 attempts per game for Milroe. Last week, we did see Jason McClellan continue his sort of 70-30 split, but Milroe getting 13 carries definitely hurt Jason McClellan. Tournament only play, far more palatable on FanDuel, where he's 7,100. A lot of interest there, but not as much on DK. The receiving room has consolidated opportunities. When you look at routes, we basically have Bond and Burton playing on every single snap almost, and then it's the rest of the guys. Even Nyblack and Dippery started splitting more at tight end. I think the most likely situation for your third receiver is seeing something like a combination of Kobe Prentice and Malik Benson, but I anticipate it being just that, a rotation. So if I'm stacking Milroe, it's going to be with Bond or Burton and moving on, but tournament only plays. Kentucky, you can't play Leary, take sacks, tough matchup. Really bad efficiency this year for Leary, just not the right game environment. Ray Davis is going to be your contrarian touches play. He's averaging 100 yards per game on the ground alone, another 25 through the air. Efficiency would likely an issue against Bama, but I can never really fault you for a contrarian Ray Davis. The receiving game is the same as it's always been. Berrien Brown, Dane Key, and Tavian Robinson with almost nothing separating them. I think they're priced appropriately. Maybe Berrien Brown should be the most expensive. He has a few more targets than Dane Key, but Dane Key's been more efficient. So ultimately can't really have any qualms. They use 5 tight ends, so that's going to be an X out spot. Not a lot of interest in this game, just one-offs here and there for tournaments. Things start to get a little interesting now where we have Texas Tech taking on Kansas. This spread is 3.5 in favor of the Jayhawks, the home team. 62 total. Opposite offenses. Texas Tech 11th in pace, 51.5% pass rate. Kansas is 112th, but they have a 41% pass rate. They're just really explosive, so you never want to fade Kansas by any means. And plus, they're implied for almost 33 points. On the Texas Tech side, Baron Morton is okay. Kansas's defense is middling, and he will have volume. The stats don't look great when you just isolate them on paper, but when you kind of give all of these stats to one quarterback, isolate just the games where one of them is played, Morton's probably going to push around 40 pass attempts. Even without efficiency, that's going to put him near a 270 300-yard bonus area. So Morton, I think, is okay. Definitely not a solid price-adjusted guy. We'll get to some really good cheap quarterbacks. So for those of you that want to look ahead, I think it's very much a stars and scrubs build for quarterback, especially in cash games. So a guy like Morton sitting in this mid-price range, not ideal. And even in the mid-price range, he's not my favorite. Taj Brooks needs to be considered no matter what. I mean, the guy is averaging 24 touches per game, 116 rushing yards, and he's active in the pass game. He has 10 targets combined over the last 3. And, the touch counts for this guy are absurd. 34, 24, 33. Sorry, I'm trying to do math on the fly. And 35. Holy smokes. This Taj Brooks workload insane, and it's why I'm probably not playing a guy like Corum. Corum, you're looking at 16 touches. Taj Brooks flat out might double him up at a cheaper price. So no brainer. Pass game, it's turned into a muddled rotation. Jaron Bradley, Miles Price still working ahead of some of the other guys. But honestly, we're making a strong case for Coy Eakin, who's not a player I anticipated getting a lot of snaps this year, but his route rate has been above 80%. Target counts are starting to rise for Eakin. He's coming off an 8-target game. Those of you that like punting, I'm fine with Coy Eakin. He's completely usable down here. And I prefer him to Xavier White, Dre McCray, the other cheap Texas Tech receivers. You're just looking at a better route rate with him. So to rank these guys price adjusted, Coy Eakin's going to be 1. Then Jaron Bradley, Miles Price. If you're running deep GPP builds, that's where we can start looking at a Xavier White or a Dre McCray, but not too much interest there. I think Eakin is the best price adjusted play. Kansas looks like we're getting another Jason Bean game. Awesome rushing numbers for him, 154 yards. It's on a limited sample. Obviously, Jalen Daniels started the year. Passing numbers are fine. we have good efficiency with Jason Bean. The Texas Tech defense doesn't scare you. He's coming up in price a little bit. So 7,400, it's not quite, the 6,400 Jason Bean play we've had a couple times this year, but he's still a fine price adjusted play behind a very good team total here. I'm also fine running him naked. To skip over running back for a second, this team, not the most consolidated passing attack. Nobody's averaging more than 4.6 targets per game. That would be Lawrence Arnold. I think they priced him appropriately. Before when these Kansas guys were like 5K, I didn't have a ton of interest in playing them. But now that we have Arnold at 45 and Grimm at 39, I'm not sure if I'm going to force a stack with Bean yet, but I'm definitely going to get more Kansas receivers than normal. We just don't have the same pricing on these guys from previous weeks. They're far more usable now as value plays. Then we get to the backfield. When games are competitive, they sort of hunker down and give Devin Neal the meaningful touches. 2 straight weeks of 20-plus carries for Devin Neal. They still use Highshaw a bit. They're just a very, very run-heavy team. We're talking about like 35, 40 rush attempts per game. Unless you're Minnesota, that's generally not viable. So Devin Neal, I think he's pretty safe, even though Highshaw, he gets a number of touches himself. Tulsa, Tulane, kind of the biggest head scratcher on the main slate for DraftKings. 23.5 point spread in Tulane's favor. Totals 53.5. Tulsa is implied for 15. I mean, I think you can almost X this team out. They're going to use 2 quarterbacks. Braylon Braxton and Kirk Francis are going to split. So absolutely no QBs. Anthony Watkins leads a committee that also has Bill Jackson and Jordan Ford involved. Normally, I'd have more interest in Watkins at 56, but they might get slaughtered in this game. I'm concerned about efficiency and volume if they're getting clobbered. The receiving room is okay. Devin Williams is their one. But since Marquis Shoulders went down, we've seen very good opportunity for Camden Benjamin. He participated in 100% of the routes last week. Like, the guy didn't leave the field one time. He's also 3,800. So there's a number of these 38 to 3,500 guys that are in play this week. I prefer Coy Eakin over Benjamin, but I mean, he's going to come up in some lineups just as a random one-off for salary savings. They will be throwing, so that's somewhat viable. They've been mixing and matching their wide receiver 3, so I'm not going to play like a Braylon Presley, Malachi Jones, or Nick Rempert or something. I'm out on those guys. For Tulane, I think Pratt is somewhat viable. I wish he was a little cheaper. He runs a lot, 264 yards, good efficiency. The volume's not great here, and this team will neuter their offense a little bit when they're playing with large leads. But with that said, efficiency should be there for Pratt. He's another middling price-adjusted signal caller on this slate. You can use him if you're playing some sort of contrarian style. Mekhi Hughes has been awesome. He has 20-plus carries in 3 straight games. His pass game volume is also coming up. He has at least 1 target in 3 straight. That's something we didn't have with Mekhi Hughes earlier this year. So I think he's fine at 5,800. For reference, he's 200 more than Watkins. That's another reason why I don't see a lot of merit to playing him when you have Mekhi Hughes sitting right here. This Tulsa defense is very bad, and they're allowing 4.6 yards per carry. In the receiving game, they use 4 receivers a lot. Lawrence Keys, Jaquan Jackson, Chris Burrell, and Keith Brown. I think they're priced efficiently. Keith Brown is a limited player, about 45-ish% of the snaps. So him being 3,400 makes sense. I think you have more safety with the 2 cheap guys we already targeted. But Keith should at least be in the conversation. Burrell, Jaquan, Keys, all pretty efficient, price adjusted. There's other players I like more in their ranges. They're a bit expensive. Georgia Tech taking on Clemson, 14-point spread in favor of Clemson, 55 total. Georgia Tech's been pretty nice, man, and they've been in some very high-scoring games. Their defense isn't good, and their offense is exciting. Different sort of challenge here. Clemson has an elite defense. Haynes King's been solid, 545 yards on the ground for Haynes King. He's averaging like 7 yards per carry, 258 passing yards per game on 31.5 attempts. Haynes King's been electric, but no discounts on him anymore, 8,800. To be honest, I love Haynes King. This just isn't the matchup, I think, where we want to really push our chips in on him. Not even implied for 21 points. Could be tough. Contrarian Haynes King, I think that's fine. In the backfield, Trey Cooley did not play in their last game. There was no word of injury, so I'm not sure if this was a performance issue or an injury that just slipped through the cracks. But they retained their committee. Just was 2 players instead of 3. Jamal Haynes and Dante Smith, almost identical in touches. 17 carries for Haynes, 15 for Smith. In the potential negative game script they'll face here, you'd have to think that drops. So not a ton of interest, especially with some of the cheaper backs we already talked about. Receiving room for Georgia Tech, you could use this as a cheap one-off situation. They throw the ball a lot, and they've been efficient, so this isn't the worst place to target. If you're using like a Clemson player, don't hate using a run back. Malik Rutherford, 71% of the routes last 2 games. Then you have Eric Singleton at 77%. From there, Blaylock has been their 3 most of the time, but it was only 59% of the routes. Christian Leary factors into this a little bit. Even Avery Boyd, his route rate's been at 38%, up to 44% last week. So they just don't have a clear wide receiver 3. I'd be focusing my attention on Rutherford and Singleton if you're playing a GT pass catcher. I never play Cade Klubnik anymore. I definitely did to start the year, and I definitely lost money. He's not running, 78 yards on the ground cumulatively, 226 as a passer. If you were to design a matchup on paper as a get right, it's probably something like this. Georgia Tech allowing 5.3 yards per carry, 8.3 yards per attempt. But the ACC is not very good. This isn't the first time we've seen Cade Klubnik in an advantageous matchup and just fall flat. Their implied team total is high. He's going to be contrarian, so that's about the best I can spin this if you're a Cade Klubnik backer. Phil Mafah, man, what a game against Notre Dame. 35 carries. Somehow he didn't have a target, which is unbelievable to me. But the game prior, he had 4 targets, so he can do it. The problem is Will Shipley is going to be back. I do not know how you keep Phil Mafah off the field after that electric performance against Notre Dame. But at the same time, like, what are they going to do? Fully bench Will Shipley? I find that very hard to believe. I'm honestly anticipating something like a 50-50 committee moving forward. I just don't know how you take Phil Mafah off the field. And you look at the underlying efficiency metrics, forced missed tackles, yards after contact per attempt. He's outperforming Shipley this year. And that's nothing against Shipley. Shipley's been very good. But Mafah, man, on a smaller sample, he has been very good. So I don't know, probably staying away, anticipating a 50-50 committee, but they're both cheap. I mean, you could do crazier things than Phil Mafah or Will Shipley. Clemson receiving game, just not a lot of interest attached to Cade Klubnik. The top 2 guys are Tyler Brown and Bo Collins. Very little separates them. Jake Brenningstool has pretty good target numbers for a tight end, but just terrible efficiency. The wide receiver 3 has been a split between Troy Stellato and Adam Randall. This is just kind of just, I don't know, information for the sake of information rather than anyone I actually want to target. Arizona, Colorado, another pretty awesome game. I'm surprised the total's this low. Arizona doesn't play with pace, though, 89. They do pass 54.5% of the time. They're 10-point favorites. The total, again, 54.5. Colorado's fast. They're 5th in pace with a 62% pass rate. I kind of like the over in this game, and I don't think it's a bad spot for DFS. So talking that stars and scrubs build, the first place you can look to as a scrub, not really like in name, but just in pricing, Noah Fafita. $6K for Noah Fafita is too cheap, in my opinion. This Colorado defense is horrific. Fafita has solid efficiency metrics. He's not going to run. He has to do it as a passer. But what does he really have to do at 6K? I mean, multiple touchdowns. If he got 300 yards, you're printing with the bonus. I mean, he's 10.4K on FanDuel. That's a guy that's wildly underpriced on DraftKings. I think he's a little overpriced on FanDuel, but yeah, Fafita is one of the first players I'm looking to in stars and scrubs builds at the quarterback. Running back position, Michael Wiley aggravated his ankle. We'll have to watch his status, but another reason why like Watkins and some of these mid-price backs aren't interesting is you might just get Jonah Coleman lead back. And I mean, once Wiley went out, 17 carries. He's the preferred pass catching back pretty clearly over DJ Williams, who's more of like a 2-down grinder. 4,300 Jonah Coleman would like become probably the stone chalk of the slate. I kind of think Wiley's going to miss this game. Right now, we have him projected in a timeshare, and Williams or Jonah Coleman still projects well in that situation. But if we get this Wiley news that he's out, expect Coleman to be among the best plays on the slate. If you're stacking Fafita, it's pretty easy. They only use 4 players, really. Jacob Cowing, Ted McMillan, they're both studs to look at. Tanner McLaughlin as the 4K tight end. He's always in the field. Even Montana Lamonius Craig is occasionally going to pop up for bigger games as the wide receiver 3. There's not much analysis. They have a good team total. It's above 30 points. I think it could eclipse this with Colorado's defense. Just clear stacking upside for Arizona. Colorado, I mean, this is one of their better matchups to end the year. Arizona's defense is definitely the weakness of their team. And they've actually performed a little better of late, but we've seen Colorado score points on worse teams. They did change play callers. I'm not really reading too much into that. Whether or not he's too expensive is up for debate, but in my opinion, Shedeur Sanders is too expensive. It doesn't even have to do with his passing numbers. Passing 62% of the time with a 5th ranked pace is going to lead to big games. but he also takes so many sacks. He's 43 sacks this year, negative 80 cumulative yards. I mean, we've seen the efficiency decline from Shedeur. He's still averaging 320 yards per game. A lot of that because of his non-con. He's too expensive, in my opinion. He's not one of the studs I prefer getting to, but decent matchup for him, I guess, in this spot. The backfield, it's mostly Dylan Edwards, but they don't run a ton, so you're kind of relying on him getting a ton of targets. He did have 7 last game, but the game prior he was at just 2, so very risky for Edwards. I'd rather just play Coleman. The receiving game is easy. They play 3 guys every snap, and then they rotate Michael Harrison, Javon Antonio, Amari Miller. So Weaver, Horn, and Hunter are all awesome plays. Think they're fine price adjusted. I also really like them if you're stacking Arizona or using Coleman, using one of these Colorado receivers as a run back or a skinny stack or something like that. Miami FSU, fun game. 51.5 total, 14-point spread in favor of FSU. Slower game. Miami's 103rd in pace, 50.5% pass rate. Florida State, 84th in pace with a 51.5% pass rate. Van Dyke at 8K is a little expensive. He doesn't run, somewhat dependent on a 300-yard bonus. He's averaging 256 passing yards per game. But yeah, that's what it is with Van Dyke. He needs a bonus. Their team total is very low. So he's just kind of on the outside looking in. I'm not playing the Miami running back roulette. This is like Oklahoma. Sometimes these guys are hurt. You don't even know. They suit up. They don't play. They've had a different carry leader 4 straight weeks. Literally 1 out of Donald Chaney, Henry Parrish, A.J. Allen, and Mark Fletcher's led the team in carries on an individual week in the last 4 weeks. I just flat out don't know how you, and none of them are cheap, so I don't know how you play any of them with confidence. The receiving room is pretty consolidated. It's Restrepo, George, and Colby Young, all priced efficiently. My favorites are the cheaper guys, George and Young. If you're playing like Restrepo, I'd flat out rather play Ted McMillan, Cowing, some of the studs. Even Keon Coleman and Johnny Wilson are cheaper than these guys. Or than Restrepo, I should say, not these guys. But yeah, he's a little expensive for my liking. I'd rather get to George or Young. If you've been watching these videos for any length of time, you know how I feel about Jordan Travis. I love him, especially in tournaments. Generally relying on a willing dance partner. They've been like 30-point favorites in a lot of their games this year. We don't have that here. Miami should push them enough. And Travis is mobile. He's averaging 274 per game, and that's with them taking the foot off the gas in a lot of spots. Miami plays excellent defense, but about as good of a time as ever to play Travis. So stars and scrubs, I think he's fine if he's your star at quarterback. The running back position's tough. 3-way committee with Benson, Toafili, Rodney Hill. Even Kazai Holmes has gotten involved. I mean, they've been in a lot of blowouts. I'm not going to read too much into that. But yeah, Benson's too expensive for his role. And then I'm not playing the cheap guys. Don't see enough volume. Keon Coleman and Johnny Wilson are projected back. They're both way too cheap if they play full-time snaps. Especially Johnny Wilson. I mean, like the efficiency on him is nuts. He's just missed 3 of their last 4 games. But both of them have been at practice. I mean, I'm going to play a lot of Johnny Wilson and Keon Coleman at these prices. They're just so easy to put in your lineups. Jaheim Bell at 5,100 is a little expensive. Like, I'm just finding the 400 to get to Wilson. Jaheim Bell's been parked around like 55% of the routes, which is kind of inexcusable for a guy who's, especially when these players were out, like he's the most talented player in your offense. But I don't know. I'm not a college football coach for good reason. So perhaps I'm wrong here. Anyway, all this to say, I don't think you can play Jaheim Bell at his price, or at least not unless it's a big tournament. Otherwise, Ja'Kai Douglas, Destin Hill, Darian Williamson, Kentron Poitier, expecting all their routes and snaps to drop with the return of Coleman and Wilson. Utah-Washington, 50-point total, 9.5-point spread. Utah is basically an X-out team for me. 120th in pace, 38% pass rate. Normally, I have interest in their running backs, but Jaquindon Jackson got hurt yet again. And we did not see the Sion Vaki show. Instead, they used Jalen Glover. I don't have any confidence in this. First of all, we don't know if Jackson plays. If he does, there's a chance he's just the stone cold bell cow. If he doesn't, or even if he does play, there's a chance he's limited and Glover's in a 50-50 committee. The best outcome here would be just getting Jaquindon Jackson ruled out, and then you could use Glover as a 4,200 pivot off Coleman or something. I don't know how likely that is. You probably see some other guys handle some carries. Vaki, man, like They used Charlie Vincent and Dejon Stanley even a little bit in their last game. I just don't know how this shakes out. It's pretty volatile. And then I'm flat out not playing a Utah pass catcher. Not with Bryson Barnes under center. He's horrible. He's averaging 133 pass yards per game. The total is extremely low in this spot. And this is a Washington game. 50-point total. Like, Utah, get it together. Anyway, on the Washington side, I mean, with Washington's not even implied for 30 points. It has nothing to do with the Huskies, man. Like, Utah needs to do their part. For DFS takeaways, like, Penix still is negative rushing yards this year. He's 10.8K. I mean, you can pay up for him. I think it's fine. But he's certainly overpriced on this slate. If you have Washington players in your lineup, you're kind of just banking on Utah getting blown out, I think, which is live. And I think that's in the range of outcomes. But I don't see Utah doing their part to make this a shootout. I think this has to be Washington getting there on their own. I would rather play Dylan Johnson. I mean, he is somewhat dependent on this game remaining close. Whereas Penix, I mean, like, he could flamethrow this team. It's a close game where Johnson gets a lot of work. Coming off 26 carries, you guys can just see the box score. 20, 8, 17, and 26 are his carry counts. You guys can pretty clearly see the games that were competitive for Johnson. He's also a good pass catcher, so I'm not fading him. I'll be mixing him into tournaments. At receiver, Romo Dunes, Jalen Polk are very safe. Not expecting to see Jalen McMillan again. Probably this year. I mean, I don't know. But Jeremy Bernard is interesting as a cheap play at 4,500. His route share was above 50% again. He was dealing with the injury for a while. So I think you can use him as a cheaper play for Washington. It's a pretty good slate for value. They do rotate tight ends. Giles Jackson plays a fair amount, but I would rather get to Jeremy Bernard. Tennessee, Missouri, 58 total. Good game. And the spread is 2 points in favor of Tennessee. Tennessee 6th in pace with a 44.5% pass rate. Missouri 63rd in pace with a 49% pass rate. Joe Milton, pretty efficient price on him, I think. 265 rush yards, averages 223 through the air on 28.5 attempts. Nothing really to say. Missouri plays good defense. They are implied for 30 points, which is noteworthy. So I'm probably going to mix Joe Milton into tournaments, but not going to be like a lock or anything. Backfield's a three-way committee. Expecting Jabari Small to return. And if you're confused on the recent box score, they played UConn. So that's why you saw it extended. But they kind of ride the hot hand at running back. It's very difficult to get to. Reminds me of Florida State. The receiving game, Squirrel White, Ramel Keaton are your top two. We've seen Dante Thornton play more and more snaps. He's above 60% of the routes now. So another 3,700 guy, but seemingly every week they have a different wide receiver 3. And I've been gambling on this like crazy. You know this. I lost money 1 week on Chaz Nimrod, lost money another week on Caleb Webb, lost money a third time on Dante Thornton, trying to predict snaps and routes when literally like one of these guys randomly pops up every game. Last two, it tentatively has been Thornton. So those of you GPP guys, he's in the mix. Missouri, not going to project as well as some previous games, but we know the upside of Brady Cook. He runs well, 274 through the air. I think among this sort of 7 to 8K range, Brady Cook stands out. He's among the better plays in this range because of his mobility, electric offense, very clear stacking partners. Every single snap and route goes to Luther Burden, Theo Weiss, and Mookie Cooper. I am expecting Luther Burden to play. He's been questionable multiple times this year and played through it. The guy's a warrior. He was also refusing medical attention last week on the sideline. So I think he's going to play. The guy's a warrior, but watch his status, of course. He's way underpriced if he's fully active. So Luther Burden will be a preferred play. If he's out, it's pretty clearly Mekhi Miller. And I think Mekhi Miller might be in play regardless. So this is a Missouri tidbit I think that's worth noting. They did not have Tyler Stevens last game, one of their tight ends. And rather than just like give all their snaps to Brett Norfleet, they ran 4 wide receivers a ton. You had Burden, Weiss, and Cooper all above 95% of the routes. But then Mekhi Miller, 75%. That's already really good for a wide receiver 4. And this is, I mean, it's not 77% or 75%, but 2 prior games, he was above 40%. He's 3,100. I mean, we can use Mekhi Miller, and if Luther Burden misses time, this guy is a smash play at 3,100. OK State, UCF, just a phenomenal game environment. Holy, and way underpriced. Like, we need to be playing guys from this game. Alan Bowman at 6,900 is a gift. He's not really a scrub because he's almost 7K, but man, this guy makes a lot of sense. I guess before I get there, 2.5-point spread in favor of OK State, 65.5 total. Both these teams are fast. OK State 46th, UCF 23rd. OK State has nearly a 54% pass rate. UCF is about 44%. We know Plumlee's involved in that. But before we get ahead of ourselves, let's talk about OK State. Bowman's averaging 213 yards per game. He was splitting time to begin the year, so he's been way better than this of late. And he's not taking as many sacks. The O-line is great. He doesn't have negative rushing yards, which is a huge surprise. He's had negative rushing yards almost every year of his career. So Bowman, man, the floor is better. The ceiling is massive. The game environment is electric. This one could get up and down. And Oklahoma State's defense is not good. That should allow UCF to do their part. Stacking Bowman, very much in play. I think Ollie Gordon's self-explanatory. In cash games, he should be the first guy in your lineup or damn near close to it. The guy carried 33 times last game. I mean, he's pushing 30 touches every single game. So there's not really much else to say. UCF's run defense is also bad. They're allowing 5.2 yards per carry. Like bad run defense. This should solidify Ollie Gordon's Doak Walker campaign. I mean, he's getting outside consideration for the Heisman. I don't think he's going to win it because Oklahoma State is probably not that good and not going to make the playoff or anything. But if the conference ended today, Oklahoma State's in the Big 12 championship, wild as that is to say. Receiving room, we've had Dazon dribbling out for a while, but it was the second consecutive week without Jaden Bray, without Blaine Green, and without Talon Shetron. That very much consolidated opportunities to Brennan Presley, Rashad Owens. Those two are locked in. They play every single snap regardless of injury. But Leon Johnson has been the main beneficiary, 19 targets over the last 2 games without those guys. If either of them return, I'm just going up to Rashad Owens and Brennan Presley. If they're out, Leon Johnson's still in play. But man, what is with this price on Rashad Owens? On DraftKings and FanDuel, 5,100? Here are his targets, 12, 9, 7, 15. I mean, cash game should start with both Rashad Owens and Ollie Gordon. And I mean, I don't even care if you play Bowman. Like, you just need both these guys. The game environment's amazing. The volume is amazing. Yeah, I mean, these should be 2 of the highest owned plays on the slate. They're both just Ollie Gordon, he is what he is. He should be like 10K. And Rashad Owens should be like, I don't know, Ricky Pearsall's price or something. Or, I mean, I don't know. He should be up there with like the LSU guys. Who else is expensive? Anyway, it doesn't matter. He should be more expensive. John Rice Plumlee, 7,500. I am okay with him. A little expensive compared to some of the value, but I mean, the skill set is elite. Amazing rushing ability. He's missed 3 games and he already has 257 rushing yards, averages 216 through the air. I mean, he's just a solid price adjusted play. His big negative is turnovers, which doesn't always hurt you for DFS. That obviously puts him into more shootout type environments. Plumlee's a solid play. RJ Harvey also averages 18 touches per game, 99 rushing yards, and he's a good receiver. Another 25 yards through the air. Harvey's in play. Receiving game, extremely easy to stack Plumlee. All the targets go to Javon Baker and Kobe Hudson. We might get Xavier Townsend back. I think that would hurt Gerard Baker. But honestly, if Xavier Townsend returns, it would hurt Gerard Baker. Javon Baker and Kobe Hudson are unaffected and good plays regardless of Xavier Townsend's status. Excuse me, they're having 2 Bakers on this UCF team. A little confusing. Minnesota, Purdue. After coming off those banger games, we got to talk about this one. The total's actually pretty high, 47.5 for a Minnesota game. I mean, wild. Pick 'em too. No spread either direction. Minnesota's slow and run heavy, 124th in pace with a 37% pass rate. So obviously you're not playing Kaliak Manis. Probably not playing a receiver. They're just too expensive with all the value we have on this slate. But the backfield, we definitely need to keep our eyes on. Last week, they did not have Darius Taylor, Sean Tyler, or Bryce Williams. They also had Zach Evans playing through an injury, so he was limited. That's led to 59 carries for Jordan Newman over the last 2 games. I kind of think we're going to have this same situation with these guys out. Taylor's been hurt all year. He returned for 1 game and re-aggravated his injury. I mean, there's other value plays. So Newman's not like a lock by any means. You've got Coleman. We talked about a few. But Newman's in the conversation. He's the best Minnesota play on the board. Last thing, I guess, for Minnesota. I wouldn't be tricked into Chris Ottman-Bell just yet. He only played 50% of the routes. So he's not a full-time receiver yet, coming off the injury. We'll see if it changes. I don't think they throw enough for it to matter anyway. Daniel Jackson's their main guy. Purdue's probably a stay away. Hudson Card, 74 yards on the ground. He averages 206 through the air. Now that Tyrone Tracy's back from injury, the backfield's a two-headed monster. The receiving game, you do know that Deion Burks is getting a lot of targets. It's been mostly inefficient. Sheffield's there too, but honestly, they've been using more Jaden Dixon-Veal. They also lost Mershawn Rice for the year. So in addition to Abdur-Rahman Yassin having missed the last 3 games, no Mershawn Rice either. So that kind of helps. Jaden Dixon-Veal, sorry. He's the stone minimum, so you can play him. He should be the wide receiver 3 if Rahman Yassin is out. Worth watching, but a couple value guys in this game. Next one up, this might be our last one. Yep, this is our last game. So Washington State versus Cal. Pick 'em, 59.5 total. Both teams are fast. Washington State 30th. Cal is 10th. That's pace. Washington State runs the air raid, 63% pass rate. Cal's pretty balanced, 49% pass rate. Cam Ward is expensive, but he's averaging a 300-yard bonus, running more than he ever has. He averages 39 attempts per game, so contrarian Cam Ward's always intriguing to me. Cal's defense definitely doesn't scare you. They allow almost 9 yards per pass attempt. The backfield's a mess. Jovinsley Schlenbacher, I don't know how to say his name. He led the team in carries, but Nakia Watson played. He's battling an injury. Dylan Payne and Jalen Jenkins. I can't remember which one of these guys got kicked off the team allegedly, but then they played. Either Payne or Jenkins, one of them was hurt. One of them was suspended, but then the suspended guy is miraculously back with the team. Apparently they were hurt enough to forego their team rules. I don't know. Maybe one of you Washington State fans can explain this to me. But at best, this is a 4-headed committee. It's just a disaster. In the receiving game, Lincoln Victor looked like he dodged another serious injury. 5,800 for him. Just such a voluminous target getter. 9.9 targets per game. He's in play. Kyle Williams is the 2. Josh Kelly's the 3. I'd rather just find my way to Victor at 5,800 than play either of those guys. On the Cal side, Mendoza's too cheap against this Washington State defense. So he's another value play I'm interested in. 5,900's flat out too cheap for him. His stats don't look good because he's played a couple games with partial snaps, but he runs a little bit. Efficiency's been solid. They pass a good amount, so Mendoza's fine. Jaden Ott is also a very good play. So Isaiah Afons is not going to play in this game, it looks like. Javian Thomas got carted off in their last game. We're looking at 4th and 5th string backs, Ashton Stedrick and Justin Williams-Thomas behind Jaden Ott. We might see a vintage like 30 carry Jaden Ott game. So among the expensive backs, I think Ott is another guy I'd rather play over like Quorum or something. He's very much in the conversation. And for those of you stacking Mendoza, still way too cheap is Jeremiah Hunter. Tron Grizel, also full-time player. Kind of came at the expense of Taj Davis, whose routes dropped about 60%. So I'm focusing on Hunter and Grizel. All right, before we move on, I'll do my top 5 DK plays for the positions, and then I'll go to the FanDuel slate so you know where we're at. So kind of mentioned, love doing the stars and scrubs. I'm going to consider the stud tier like 75 and above and the scrub tier like 6K and under. I think Mendoza and Fafita are your top 2 scrubs. I like playing them both. For your stars, I'm very interested in John Rhys Plumlee at 7,500. And then, honestly, Alan Bowman, I think, should be in this discussion at 69. Just the game environment is extremely good. Otherwise, Jason Bean at 74 is another guy I would put in to round this out. So I'm not playing as much Penix, Haynes King, McCarthy, Milrow. Travis is a GPP guy. But I think the slate suits this like really cheap range and then this sort of like upper 7K range as well. That's where I'm looking for QBs. Running backs. This will be a mixture of stars and scrubs as well. So we talked about a lot of the cheap guys. Jonah Coleman for Arizona, 4,300. Jordan Newman at 4K, assuming Minnesota still has these guys injured. Those would be my top 2 punts. Then you've got Mekhi Hughes for Tulane, 58. They're facing Tulsa. The guy should just absolutely destroy. I think I skipped over Cody Schrader when we did Missouri. Excuse me for doing that. But to talk about him now, because he is in the top 5, they basically aren't using Nathaniel Pete anymore. The guy's a walking 100-yard bonus, over 20 carries routinely. So he's in the conversation. A very good play, in play for cash, too, at 6K. And then the last guy, you guys should know where I'm going. It's Ollie Gordon, 7,900. I think he is very much a priority on this slate. At receiver, you guys can probably guess it too. The number one value is Rashad Owens, 5,100. This guy should be like a 7K receiver on this slate. Lincoln Victor does pop as well at 58, just the raw target volume. From there, Luther Burden is 3, assuming he plays. Too cheap for the targets he gets. Ted McMillan is 4. I wouldn't have a big gripe with you if you had wanted to play like Jacob Cowing over him or something. So that makes sense. And then an interesting one that pops for us for the last one, I'm not going to do duplicates. So Leon Johnson's on this list too, but Tron Grizel is right here at 4,300. So another potential value to get to. All right, let's go to the extra games for FanDuel. Excuse me if I accidentally clicked some that aren't on the slate. I did all of the slates already on the sheet. This one's on FanDuel. Ole Miss, Georgia, 58 total, 10.5 point spread. Ole Miss is 12th in pace. Georgia's 115th. Ole Miss, 43% pass rate. Georgia's at 51%. Yeah. Jackson Dart, 7,900. A little expensive, but game environment has a better total, honestly, than I thought it would. He's 334 rush yards, averages 274 through the air. He's not among the most expensive signal callers on FanDuel, so I think he's a middling play. Judkins, 8,400 is a very generous price on him. The guy's averaging 20.4 touches per game. He's coming off a 23 carry game where Ulysses Bentley only got 6 carries. So you can see how they view their backfield when the going gets tough and they need to hunker down and use their stud. So still like Judkins. The only thing I'll say here is you're going to see JJ Pegues, this defensive lineman. He has 1 carry in each of the last 2 games. Ole Miss runs this like weird goal line package where they give the ball to Pegues. So Judkins is at risk of, a Pegues touchdown from the 1 yard line or something. If Ole Miss gets down there, just worth noting. I still think Judkins is fine. They've only really used 3 receivers, Jordan Watkins, Trey Harris, and Dayton Wade. They're just middling plays on FanDuel from 7.2 to 8.2K. Georgia, Carson Beck's averaging 303 yards per game. He runs a little bit, 70 cumulative yards. He's, I think, a little too cheap on FanDuel. Not like a screaming value, but he's definitely in play there. Kendall Milton and DeJuan Edwards rotate in the backfield. Neither really stands out. It's like a 65-35 split in favor of Edwards. The biggest news we got today was that Brock Bowers might play, which kind of muddles the whole slate. I mean, on FanDuel, he's way too cheap if he plays his like full-time role, but I sort of don't think he will, even if he's active. So I don't know what to do with Bowers. Hopefully, like their beat reporter or something tweets like no limitations or something, or maybe he does tweet that they're limited and we just get the answers for Bowers. But as of recording this, I just don't know. I'm guessing I'm not going to play him because of the risk. FanDuel is a massive slate. I just don't know if you need to take it on. If he's out or limited, Dominic Lovett, Ra Thomas, and Ladd McConkey are all too cheap. 7K or below. Prefer McConkey, but even Ra had 7 targets in the last game at 5,500. That'll open a ton of stuff for you with Georgia. West Virginia, Oklahoma, 12.5 point spread in favor of the Sooners. And we have a 57.5 total, kind of differing teams. West Virginia very slow, 116th with a 36.5% pass rate. Oklahoma 13th in pace, 46% pass rate. Garrett Green is expensive on FanDuel. I question the ceiling being so slow and run heavy, but he's certainly involved in that part of the game. 427 rush yards for Garrett Green is solid. But at the same time, I like playing them when they're favored in easy matchups. They don't have that here, so probably not going to play a lot of Green. The backfield's devolved into a committee. Jaheim White, 16 carries. Donaldson, 14. Even Justin Johnson gets a bit, so not going to play a lot of West Virginia backs. And they don't really throw enough to get the receivers involved. And Hudson Clement's probably going to return here. I think that muddles things for Carter, Fox, Gallagher, Traylon Ray. Dylan Gabriel, 11.3K on FanDuel. I still think he's worth considering, man. Like, this guy has one of the best roles in all of college football right now. As we've talked about many times, seeing more designed attempts than he's ever seen in his career. He's averaging 294 yards per game through the air. You can play Stoops, who had 14 targets last game, Farouk at 9 targets. Nick Anderson only had 6, but the guy plays every single snap. So those are 3 players you can definitely look to. Farouk at 6,400 really stands out on FanDuel. The backfield is the same as like a Miami. Roll your dice. Is it going to be Tawi Walker, Major, Sawchuck, or Barnes? I have no idea. Usually just wait for the Oklahoma beat to tweet who's hurt and then decide if I have interest or not. Not a FanDuel game, Next one is Texas TCU. Texas favored by 10.5, 55 total. Texas is 56th in pace. TCU is third. Texas has a slightly heavier run rate than TCU. We did get news. Quinn Ewers is going to play. Doesn't run a lot, but averages 272 through the air. He's not expensive on this slate. It's a pretty good game environment. Don't love Quinn Ewers, but for tournaments, you could do worse. Jonathan Brooks is a good play. He's 10K. He's coming off 3 of the last 4 games with at least 20 carries, averages 115 yards per game. Involved in the pass game as well, so love Brooks. He's fine if he's the guy you decide to pay up for. And the receiving game is really nice. You know exactly where the ball is going. Xavier Worthy at 7,100 is just way too cheap. He had 14 targets last game. You can play Worthy with confidence on FanDuel. I also think you can play Sanders at 6K. They're tight end. I would rather play both of them price adjusted over 80. Mitchell, who obviously caught the touchdowns, but 11 targets still fine. I still think 900 pricing gap between him and Worthy is not warranted. For TCU, another Josh Hoover start. He's really cheap, but I don't really see the need to get there on FanDuel. There's tons of cheap guys. I'd rather play like an elite stud at quarterback than go down to Hoover. Volume will be good, though, so they're third in pace, 56% pass rate. Hoover's been fine enough. The backfield, Amani Bailey, he's way too cheap on FanDuel. The guy's averaging 20.4 touches, 101 rushing yards per game, and then as a receiver, another 16 yards. 7,200. I understand they're underdogs, but my goodness, very cheap price for Amani Bailey. The receiving game is more interesting than it's ever been because Dylan Wright is out, Warren Thompson is out, and Jack Beck is out. So that means we're going to see more consolidation than ever between J.P. Richardson, Savion Williams, and Jalen Robinson. I mean, this is a better week than ever to stack TCU with all the injuries. I don't know if you need to, but like Jalen Robinson at 5,400, 8 targets last game. This is live. Even as one-offs, run backs. I mean, you can use these TCU receivers more confidently than you've ever been able to. Florida LSU, 14.5 point spread, 67.5 total. Obviously, we need to play this game. Florida's 88th in pace with a 56% pass rate. Graham Mertz just takes too many sacks for me to ever really consider him. He's awesome as a passer, but he's got to run a little bit. The negative rushing is going to kill you on a slate like this where there's so many studs on FanDuel. Exact 50-50 committee between Etienne and Johnson. You can find better price adjusted plays. The 3 wide receiver set is solid. I mean, we know it's Ricky Pearsall, Eugene Wilson, and Khalil Jackson. Khalil Jackson had 8 targets. He's 5,400 on FanDuel. You can certainly play him. Eugene Wilson's coming off the big game, so we saw the price hike, but still in play for contrarian builds. Honestly, like I'm probably just going to play Jaden Daniels. He's going to play. He cleared concussion protocol, 684 rushing yards, 310 through the air. Florida's defense doesn't scare you at all. They're at home. You can stack with Neighbors. You can stack with Thomas. You can play a contrarian Kyron Lacey. I mean, just play some LSU guys for sure. In cash, I think you just lock in Daniels and the cheap quarterback and go from there. The real story is the backfield where Logan Diggs is not going to play. I think you see this just full committee. I'm guessing it's John Emery and Josh Williams leading the way. And then I think Caleb Jackson's involved as a third. And maybe we see some Noah Cannon, Trey Bradford, whomst knows. All right, let's see how many we have left. Mississippi State A&M's not on this. Duke UNC, this closes it out. 14-point spread in favor of UNC, 50.5 total, so pretty low. Duke's 108th in pace with a 44% pass rate. North Carolina's 15th in pace, 48.5% pass rate. We'll make this pretty easy for Duke. They're on Grayson Loftus, third-string quarterback. No thanks. Jordan Waters is more expensive than Amani Bailey. No thanks. Jock Moore, right there with Amani Bailey. You get the point. There's opportunity cost with every Duke player. So you can't play a receiver either because Loftus. But can you play North Carolina guys? You can play a contrarian Drake May. He's averaging 311 through the air, 254 rush yards on the year. May's always in play. Omari and Hampton also averages 21.3 touches per game, 118 rush yards, and he averages another 17.5 as a receiver. In a world where Ollie Gordon doesn't exist, Omari and Hampton likely get some like Doak Walker talk. The receiving game, they crushed their opponent last week. I believe they played Campbell, an FCS team. Could be wrong on the opponent, but routes got a little weird as they do when you play FCS teams. Walker's going to be fine. He got injured in their second most recent game. 9,400 is a fair price for him. I think Nate McCollum returns. If he does, 5,300 is a screaming buy for him. And then J.J. Jones should be the wide receiver 3. There's no world where he should be more expensive than McCollum. Otherwise, if any of these guys miss, I expect to see this buy rotation, expect more 2 tight ends, Blackwell, players like that. We have all the other games for the night slate on DK2. We won't talk about them now, but before we head out, we will hit on the top plays on FanDuel. So number 1 is Jaden Daniels. Again, I think you just play him in cash. 2 is John Rhys Plumlee. 9,200 is a screaming value over there. We've got Jason Bean at 9,100, Carson Beck at 94, Alan Bowman at 88. Depending on who you like out of those guys, for cash games, I'm probably trying to combine one of the sub 9.5K guys with Jaden Daniels. For reference, Dylan Gabriel's right there. He's number 6. At running back, this will be interesting because we didn't touch on most of them. Okay, we briefly touched on this. Jason McClellan, 7,100. He's a very good buy on FanDuel. Cody Schrader, 9,500. He pops. Jonah Coleman, this is assuming Wiley's out at 81. Amani Bailey at 72. And then Ollie Gordon, even at 11.6K, he makes an appearance. Just missing the cutter, Taj Brooks and Jonathan Brooks. At wide receiver, we go down to, excuse my scrolling. Apparently, Rashad Owens is 6,900 on FanDuel as well. Play him. Malik Neighbors, 10.5K, still pops as the second most valuable receiver. Xavier Worthy is 3 at 71. Jaleel Farouk is 4 at 6,400. Nate McCollum's 5 at 53, assuming he plays, but we'll go beyond that in case he's out. Interestingly, Trey Harris at 8,200 pops as the 5th guy if McCollum were to miss. But that'll do it for the slate. Got it done in under an hour. All right. Speedy. If you have a question, reach out to me on Twitter at Matt_Gajewski. If you have feedback, please leave it in a comment. Otherwise, good luck, everyone. Hope somebody takes down something big. Until next time, we'll see you guys later. Good luck.